I better go look.
Okay, guys. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever.
Good night.
My response, everybody's here. Right?
We're about 10 short.
No, everybody's here.
We are.
Everybody's here.
We're here.
Yes.
We're here.
Everybody's here.
Everybody.
Right. Everybody's here.
What are you getting at, babe?
Why do you keep
Okay.
saying? Oh, here we go.
Okay.
He was
Awesome.
waiting for Amy, I think. Oh, I'm muting.
All right. So I watched the movie Ashes and Diamonds.
Oh, no.
I saw the movie maybe 40 years ago, or maybe longer than that. So I remembered only the parts of it. But the movie was based on, in short, I will say, before we really go into our time today and wrap it up, that about this movie we'll be talking the week that will come back in the Hard Choices. But in a short, the movie was based on a poem by Norwid. And he lived in the 18th century. And the whole idea about the poem is that we struggle, we fight and for freedom, and then we really don't know whether we turn into ashes or, maybe the diamond will be under the ashes. And that gives us the image that a lot of people turn into ashes before really the diamond happens. And you could see that the diamond didn't happen for a long time. Poland was not on the map for 123 years, from 1795 until 1918, when it got freedom back. But during this time, there were reprisals, and they were really butchered reprisals. It means like we lost a lot of lives during that time. And it was 1830 and 1861, and then of course the First World War came, and we were able to create the army and come back into life when 1918. And 1939 brutally we were attacked by Germans and Russians in the silent pact that Poland didn't know. So when Germans attacked Poland, the whole army was running east, and they fell into the Red Army, and the Red Army was in pact with Hitler. So they didn't capture the army. The army, simply Polish army, went there to restore itself and come back. So Russians, they took the whole army, imprisoned the whole army, and they brought all the officers to Katyn. And Katyn, well,
Was the word you just said cutting? Like C-U-T-T-I-N-G? Did anyone catch that word?
yeah, there's a movie made, Katyn, and it's hard to talk about it.
You don't have to talk.
Well,
I can talk.
Go watch the movie. It'll be good.
good at the beginning. All right, so the situation was that they brought all these officers, about 30,000 of them, and they murdered them in one day. And they put into mass grave all the intelligentsia when it comes to the war and protecting the country. So, and then they denied that for 50 years. They blamed Germans that Germans did that. So for 50 years, they didn't admit that. And after 50 years, they admitted that they did it. So the Polish government was going to go to Russia, reconcile with Russians. And the plane that they sent the plane, and the plane crashed and killed the whole Polish government. It was some years ago. Probably you remember that. And so the whole situation about our experiences and experiences with Soviets and experiencing war. We know that 39 happened, and then that we lost all the officers, 30,000 of them. And then when eventually the army was formed in Russia, Polish army, the first army actually left Russia and went more toward Italy. And then there another was formed, and that army came to Poland. And that army mostly had blue-collar workers as officers and Russians as the helpers. So they came to Poland to take over Poland and to bring communism to Poland in 1944. So when they came, the Polish underground army tried to free the country, free Warsaw, and that would take over kind of the control. Well, the whole Russian army stopped at Wisła, and they didn't cross, and they watch what the Polish army is doing. So Hitler at that time was infurious about the whole uprisal and ordered killing zone, building by building. It's hard to talk about it. So the whole end of it was that Germans killed about 200,000 in Warsaw. They butchered everyone they caught and ruined the whole city. Warsaw was down to the ground. And then the Russians came. The whole underground army was almost gone in Warsaw. Then the Soviets came and they started the new country, the Polish country, under the rules of communists. And from 1944 until 1953, when Stalin died, they tortured and murdered thousands of Polish army underground members who kept fighting. For them, like in the movie is, that for them, everything was closed because of their past. What was open is only jails. And in jails meant torture. So today, they find these graves in Poland after this period. So I have this passage, how it really was when they came. The Soviets came to Poland. And it was called, it is in Polish, so I will translate this as much as I can. The passage of the
Did you write this, Jerzy?
What is it?
Did you write this? Where is the passage from?
This passage is from the history from Poland. It comes from Poland.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
And it's history, and it's the web is do rzeczy. It means DORZECZY.pl. So you can look into that, and you can find a lot of there about the Polish history, I guess. But the passage here is how they came and how they behave. And the passage in the article, or the passage in this history, is women's health. And so it says here that murders and robberies were normal element of the Soviets when they were coming through Poland to free Poland. And that was the Red Army. Usually, soldiers were under influence of alcohol. They were losing all controls. The Red Army looked like gypsies, like gypsies going with all the things they have, and usually the wagon has everything on it, like the whole house. Soldiers, they walk with stolen pajamas, and they had umbrellas on the arm, and on tanks they had stolen furnitures and rolled down the carpets, and even the cages with chicken. The really nightmare was that in this 44 and 45, it was not really the robbery that they did. It was the raping. Women, they found themselves in a extremely dramatic and vulnerable situation. The Red Army soldiers raped everything what was moving. They didn't let even 80-year-old grandmothers to get away with it, nor very young girls. So the probability that my mother and And every mother of my friend was raped at that time. Every woman was raped almost in that time by Soviets. So you can imagine Polish people spending with Soviets in Poland 50 years. Eventually brought solidarity. But between 89 and 44, they really raped that country immensely. They did everything to break the spirit of Polish people. And eventually they didn't. We freed ourselves from them. Well, we'll open more about that in our week when we come back. But the poem, what I wanted to tell you, the poem, and you can look into the, you can see the power of the poem, right? The movie is made based on the poem, and then and others are inspired too. So let me see. Former Pink Floyd frontman Roger Waters claims that Ashes and Diamonds had enormous impact on him as a young man. And the lyrics of the Pink Floyd song, Two Suns in the Sunset, from the band's 1983 album, The Final Cut, makes references to the film. Okay. Well, we'll have our virtue, the third virtue that we are working on. This week. And it was not improving is normal. Becoming human is abnormal. Anybody would like to talk about that?
Hi, guys.
Hey,
Well, that's a lot to integrate into being human is not normal and not getting better is normal. I think that the movie Parasite shows the dangers of normalcy. And it's a cautionary tale that the war being fought between the classes can get out of hand and create death and destruction in addition to the poverty, the conditions that are already so bad for people. So that's what I would say about being human is not normal and it's very difficult. And I think the people in Parasite were not able to achieve that. That's why I think it deserved an Oscar.
you deserve.
Yes.
Okay.
It is a series of paintings and small poems, not unlike the poem you wrote about the heating coil being stolen. And there's other things woven in. There's humor and horror and absurdity. But every frame of that film is a painting. And I thought it was structured perfectly. and I thought it made a huge emotional impact. And one scene in particular was the family underneath the coffee table listening to the rich people talk about them, and the father listening to how he smells to other people. That was incredibly sad. And it doesn't mean that he did the right thing. It means that that's what can happen if you don't do the right thing. If you carry your anger and shame and hatred with you, you can end up committing murders and atrocities. And it's no different than any other war movie. When you're watching a war movie and you're watching people getting raped, countries getting raped, those aren't portraits of goodness either. They're cautionary tales of what to avoid. That's what I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Quiet today.
It's Therese here. Thanks, Amy. I actually agree with that. I actually saw the movie with some friends, and it started off so funny and so placid. I couldn't, we couldn't see how it could turn so quickly into something that was just so horrific. And you can definitely see the transition from just like a so-called normal family with their, you know, their small issues and trying to fit in and trying to survive in their small funny ways, to something that, I don't know, the horror that sort of really built up through that, through comparing themselves to other people, and yeah, just how one thing led to another, and then they found themselves in this really bad situation. So yeah, very interesting, dramatic type of movie, something to really think about.
Sorry, Jersey. Hi, it's Sherry. I think that I understood your question last night or yesterday to be why Parasite should not have been worthy of an Oscar. And from my perspective, as I was trying to recreate in my head, because I actually watched The Great Debaters yesterday and was so moved, and had my daughter who's 17 with me, and we were so moved by it. And it was such a fabulous feeling. And I was thinking about how I never felt that in Parasite, right? I mean, I was genuinely disgusted, was really the feeling I had when I watched that movie, because I don't think that anyone was worthy of the sympathy or empathy. I mean, there's empathy, right? But there was also this whole sense that the family felt entitled to so much more than they had, and were unhappy all the time with their circumstances, and felt like they were owed it from complete strangers. It didn't really matter to them who the other family was. They didn't see them as human beings either. They saw them as a way to better themselves, or to get something like the bottles of liquor. It's actually interesting, Amy, when you presented the scene where they were under the table, because what I remember was when they had the opportunity to be at the table, they drank everything to gluttony, right? Like, I mean, to such excess, right? Because it didn't make them feel better. It didn't give them any sense of well-being. It, you know, they didn't take what they, you know, they didn't take a potato because they were starving, right? They took a lot more and couldn't stop themselves. So similar, Therese, what you said, it's like a series of acts that kept happening, but they were making every choice, right? And taking themselves further and further down that path. So, I mean, I imagine for me, the reason that perhaps it shouldn't have won an Oscar, right, it has more to do with not great filmmaking, but the fact that it almost idealized something that was awful and made people start to think, well, the victims had, were being preyed upon and they were getting theirs. I don't know. It just did not, I loved the movie for some things, but I never felt good, right? I felt like I had had a bad meal and wanted to be really sick after it.
That's very interesting. Thank you. You're on the way. We are on the way. What about the movie Stand and Deliver? How did you feel about that movie?
For me, it's been a long time since I saw that. So that's on our viewing tonight, to be frank with you. But it's been a long time since I saw that one. That one was one filled with enormous, the way I look at Stand and Deliver is what I remember of the feelings was that it was so hopeful. Right? It was filled with something that meant that anyone, anywhere could, if you believe in something or you believe in a person, they can transmit, right, so much hope, and that the capacity of a person is unlimited in truth, right? And pretty much anyone can achieve something if somebody believes in them and believe in themselves.
You saw the movie The Great Debaters yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, tell me about these people who were in that movie. The people that debated the Black, community.
So,
what was it about them?
I'm sorry, say that again?
What was it about them? What was the state? This is 1935.
Yeah, so each one of them had, what was interesting was the fact is that they all came from families. While they might have been poor or middle class or their own level of middle class in a, society, their families believed so strongly in education and believed so strongly in their right for those children to get education as a way of leading their people out. They're like many, their families were still left over from slavery, right? One of the boy who was the most lost, the college student who was kind of the great debater who was a little bit lost, who knew so much, right? He had so much education. But, his family was out of slavery. His parents were killed, and so he was sort of in between. And the 14-year-old boy, right, whose father every single day told him that you're on a path, you're on a journey, and you have to do what's right, and you have to do your best every single day. On one level, so much pressure, right, on a 14-year-old, and yet so much reality that he could never make a mistake, right, because any mistake could cost him his life, right, in the place that they lived, and that for him, education was the way out, right, and education was the inspiration for them. And I think each one of them, the woman too, believed that she was not constrained by the belief that, never mind that she was, Black, she was also a woman, right? And she believed that she could achieve anything and that she was worthy. She had a lot of self-worth, that she believed she was worthy of being able to sit at the table and direct, her destiny, and that education was going to be her path as well.
So these families, existentialism of these families, like 1935, these Black families, and what they were facing with in their life, comparing to the family from the Parasite. Now, talk to me about this existentialism, what they are facing in life, what is happening to, both families, how they are, what are the virtues are, and what's going on.
So, for me, the family in Korea was not threatened every day with their existence. They were not threatened with the fact that if they stepped once out of line, they would be killed up, potentially lynched, potentially burned alive. That was not their fate. Their fate was poverty, in the face of wealth, right, juxtaposed about wealth, but their safety was not a part of that. They had, you know, access to food. They had access to things. They wanted more. They saw themselves versus everyone else and felt like they were entitled to take more, right? Whereas the families, the Black families in 1935, you know, they felt that by bettering themselves, they could change the systems. They believed that they had a part of history and a part of destiny, and that through education and through the use of the laws and even civil disobedience, but nonetheless, a moral, this discussion about, is a moral law, something that you dispute, or, how do you navigate that path? They still felt that they could impact history, and that they were working through the education of their children to change the way things were. But they were much more threatened. Their lives were much more threatened on a day-to-day basis if they were in any way, shape, or form perceived as doing something against the white community that they lived in. I mean, they were, yeah.
So 14-year-old delivers the speech, the
Yes.
debate at Harvard in 1937. He's a Black boy, delivers the speech. In that speech, he talks about Gandhi and talks about unjust law that sometimes needs to be broken.
I love the line at the end where he said, you should pray that I choose civil disobedience versus, because he said the choice between civil disobedience and criminality, right? And you should pray that I choose civil disobedience.
Now, so we see the family, we see, Black people suffering immensely, right? Even though they keep the integrity, right? Intact.
Yes.
Even though it's a horrifying situation for them. And in front of them, there are challenges. We know the challenges. We can't even imagine what happened, right? Between 1935,
Yeah.
before, 60s. And it's a constant fight and dealing with unjust laws, right? And breaking them. That was the whole thing about Texas and lynching and the law, unjust law about that. And that was the whole speech about that delivered by the boy from Harvard,
Mm-hmm.
white boy, that we should never break the law, right?
Right.
Under any circumstances. This 14-year-old comes in, delivers that speech. Now go back from here, go to this family into Korea and tell me what's going on up there.
Well, in Korea, I mean, other people might have a point of view here, but in Korea,
I'm talking about that family from
the family is breaking the law every day, right? I mean, in a sense, they're setting themselves up to not just to be of service, right, and earn money from this family, right? And taking jobs and driving the family and helping, that isn't enough for them, right? It isn't enough for them to take a job and get paid. They keep wanting more, right? And they and they begin to believe that taking what's right, or they're feeling that it's theirs to take, right? Because they have some kind of access, and that access gives them a sense of power, I guess. But to me, they're as criminal, in their actions, because they're simply not satisfied with anything that they have. They have a high desire to take more, not use education to better themselves, and to advance and get themselves out of it. They want to take it from someone else.
So it's not a family that is facing a death and life situation and breaks the law because of that. It's not that family, right?
That's not their story.
The basic integrity in the family doesn't exist.
Right. Right. They use each other too. They keep sending each other in to do worse things, you know, and, you know, they don't seem to have any sense of values or boundaries. Unlike, you know, in the families in the 1935, those families had very strong sense of values and purpose and self-worth. And even the boy who has to pull out of the debating team, right? Even that, you know, that one where his father wouldn't let him associate with, you know, the teacher who might be a communist, because the father was just so afraid that he would make a mistake, you know, that it would take his son and his shot through education and would really harm him.
So we go to the parasite to the end of the movie. The father murders somebody, hides himself inside the cellar.
Yeah.
The son is going to educate himself, get money, and get him out of there. What is the message of the movie? What's going on? What is justified?
None of the poor family's actions are justified.
Yeah.
The point of the film is to say exactly that. When you asked, boy, if that one wins an Oscar, then what is going on in our world? We have a pretty bad society if this is what represents what's going on. I think you answered your question in that statement. Sometimes art is a representation of of the sickness in our society, and not just people in the 1930s making better choices. That's one way of telling that story, is that there's an alternative, better, higher virtue to achieve. Another way of telling that story is to say, look what happens if you go in the opposite direction. You perpetuate sickness. You are not a victim just because you're poor, just because you have access, just because you're manipulating. And a lot of that is happening in our society with the class struggles we have now in this country as well. There are a lot of people who feel very angry that they're losing and giving and sacrificing, and they want to take bad ways of going about getting what they need or what they think they should have.
The basic virtues of human being, like cleanness. You know, my family, or I came to Aniela's family, they were very extremely poor, and but they had water, and they clean the boards they walk on. Those boards were very old, but when you walk into the room, you could see that they were clean. So there were basic virtues of the family, integrity, intact, no matter what. And, you know, when family lives that way, it keeps the sense of humanity with itself. And there's basic humanity, when it's pushed to the level that the family loses it, it's either dies or it moves into the breaking law at that point. And to talk about the family and sometimes doing something wrong, I will go to a U-bomber. So the one that sent bombs to people and people died. At a certain point, he left a message. And that message was seen by his brother. The brother recognized that he did that. That was his brother. He called police. So he didn't cover for his brother, that the brother did something wrong. Very wrong. He simply murdered people. The father in Parasite murdered human being. And there are no values in the family, basic values. So we cannot develop sympathy for and justify breaking laws or that kind of a family. We cannot justify that the family is that way at all, any family in the world.
I'm simply stating that art is going to, no one should feel good watching Parasite. Everyone should feel sick to their stomach. That was the intent of that film.
Well, if there is no goodness driving the movie, there is no art in it.
I think goodness comes after in the discussion. It is meant to provoke discussions like this.
Well, it just only tells us one thing.
I got a lot more than one thing that I felt I wanted to discuss with people after the film, but everyone responds to art very differently. And sometimes the repulsion of looking at the ugliness of bad choice after bad choice can make someone turn completely off on the whole thing. And I understand that.
Well, I cannot start with the criminal and somehow justify the criminal in the end, or make a movie about the criminal and the criminal that takes advantage of the others and make a movie about that criminal. It just, for me, it's a waste.
Right.
And that doesn't deserve any look into it at all, because there is no goodness in it somewhere. Somewhere has to be. And, poor family that is simply criminals. They are criminals. They are not really poor family. They represent Korea, right? They just and represent some kind of situation when the family is pushed to the limit. They're not. They're just criminals. That's all. They're not
But
really.
a family that behaves above and beyond their situation and does strive for higher virtues doesn't represent every family either.
Well, so who they really represent in life? That family. Do they represent extremely poor people battered by life? No, they don't. They represent who? They represent, people that don't want to take advantage by others. That's all. So the movie doesn't have any values. It's just simply there are no values of humanity in that movie.
Well, I saw some, but I don't want to dominate this about my opinion.
Well, we have a lot of opinions. Is anybody else want to say something?
I have something. This is Jeannie from Los Altos. From what I see, understanding a problem doesn't actually help me move toward a solution. And I feel like that's the disconnect. So understanding what I don't want doesn't actually help me move toward what I do want. And that's the problem I have with the movie, which I think is what, Jersey, you're saying. So the solution is not in the space of where the problem is, but I can use the problem to prompt me into that. And that's what I think, Amy, you're doing internally, but that's what you're doing internally. The movie doesn't offer that. So that's all I was thinking. Comments?
Well, sometimes I get that effect from a painting and I get very disturbed and I think it's ugly. And others have called it something great. And I guess it's up to me, you know, I'll walk away going, that just makes me feel bad and I wouldn't want to look at that. But if others are seeing something that has a message, I'll discuss it with them and find out if I can look at it longer and see something. And oftentimes that is happening after you've viewed the art. So I just don't know if it's always important for it to happen as a message embedded in the characters of the film, or if it's okay for it to provoke a discussion after that makes you not want to behave in the way that the characters did in the film.
Well, if discussion is really after, then it's manipulated. The art cannot have really thinking about what is the discussion after. So the art is not really in the discussion. The art is in doing. So somebody is doing the piece of art, right? So it's not. It doesn't think about discussion. Doesn't think about where is it going and so on. So the art has to be about something, right? What is it about? So,
sometimes it poses questions.
well, it's not posing question. It just happens that question happen after, right? So when you see something, okay, if you cannot find goodness at all anywhere, then, and you cannot really, you are facing with the family that simply is doesn't have any basic human values. So you are facing with the family of no human values at all, and then where are these families? Because I really don't know them. You see, they don't represent a family in the world.
I think they did have values.
Where?
They stuck together as a family. That is one value. And it was twisted and perverted. And they were taught, and the cycle continued. You could see in the next generation.
Oh, mafia stays together too.
Right.
Yeah, then they kill and murder other people.
Yep.
So, sticking together cannot be used here as the value of the family. And the brother that saw the U-bomber, that's his brother, called police. He didn't stick with him.
Right.
He reported on him, sent him to jail because he did something wrong.
Yes, I would hope that he would.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, those.
So when the family sticks together and doing something wrong, we cannot see it as a good thing.
No, but it's still a value. It's still a value. It's fidelity to the family. It's faithfulness to the family unit. Even if they do completely wrong, it's still a value, Jerzy. You can't say it's not a value.
Not a value. Doing wrong things is not a value.
No, I'm saying that
You can be disciplining and robbing houses, right? And you can engage yourself in learning how to be good in robbing others, right, or raping others. Is it the value in it? Is it the value there?
Of course not. The dedication to each other and to the family unit is a value.
But it shouldn't be there when somebody really murders somebody, or somebody is a criminal. The one that is in the family should recognize it. There's something wrong, really bad and wrong, and should correct that. And if there is nobody there to correct, then we have a mafia. We have people that simply are not in the world. There is no such thing as families like that in the world. That movie doesn't represent people.
Oh, it absolutely does. There are families like this in the world.
There are not many families like that in the world. And I don't really even see that the movie ever were made really with people that they don't have any values and can get away with it. I just cannot even see any movie that was made that a person that was a criminal could get away with it at the end, unless it was really dark and showed in darkness that the darkness prevails itself at the end.
I have another small thought, and I think that Amy, I think you're the art. When I was in the Prado Museum in Madrid, I remember thinking the real art is walking around. So I think how you're receiving it, interpreting it, and using this movie to launch you into goodness, I think that's very valuable. But the movie itself, by itself, takes a lot of magic and serendipity to squeeze out goodness from it.
I saw so much magic in the craft of it as well. And because I'm in that industry and I study this craft a lot, I was highly appreciative of that. And there was such beauty, and there was a person directing it and writing it, and people creating this with a vision and an idea of what story they wanted to tell. And I thought it was told incredibly effectively.
Isn't that also you being the artist interpreting it? That's your contribution.
Yes. Therefore, it is art. If I am an artist and I deem it art, it is art. If you are not an artist and you deem it not to be art, it is not art to you.
That reminds me of a famous line in a movie with Julia Roberts, the Mona Lisa Smile. And she's presenting her 4-year-old painting to a group of prep students, art students of hers. And they say, well, what do you think of this art? She asks them. They say, well, I don't think it's art. She declares, okay, it's art. Okay, now what do you think of this art?
Exactly.
But I would argue it requires the reception of it to
all works of art require the reception. Jerzy does not think so. He thinks that it is an independent thing that exists on its own and it's either art or not art. I believe that there is always a relationship to the viewer with a work of art. It doesn't exist on its own in a forest where no one hand is clapping. There's always a relationship.
Yeah, so it's about the interaction, right? An effective interaction with anything. You can interpret it to your benefit, right?
That's my opinion.
You can learn not to do something, or you can learn to do something.
I'm saying that the artist doesn't control that.
Yes, it's left to chance. It's left to too much.
Movie makers are not really artists. They are making movies with the ideas of how the audience is going to receive. They write for audience, and some of them, they don't do that way. Some of them maybe write like playwriters. They don't think about audience. They think about the play.
Every filmmaker is thinking about an audience.
Yeah, but the artists don't.
Do you happen to know the movie house called Participant Media that Jeff Skoll started?
I know Jeff Skoll.
Yeah, I know Jeff Skoll. He's a classmate of mine. But
oh wow,
I think most of the intention of those movies is very clear. So I think he built into all those movies that I think rightly get the Oscars a much more clear and bold intention toward goodness. And I think it leaves the audience less at their own peril, right? To either do something good or bad with it.
So music is not to be listened to and visual art is not to be seen?
Oh, I'm not making that claim at all.
No, this was a question for Jerzy.
Oh, okay, sorry. Thank you.
No,
so
he's saying that creative artist doesn't think of the result as far as the audience. He's saying it's more like an internal vision, I think, but I'll let him.
Yeah. Poetry or music has its own independence, and artists are artists because they do not connect themselves to the audience, but to the art, and that's why they are artists. So also, the art is about unfortunate human being, not fortunate. Art is about some kind of hard choices in life and unfortunate people. And if there is something fortunate that the art doesn't exist, then art is not about people who are in glory. And there's nothing about that family in Parasite that the art would even consider, writing or creating something about them, because they are not unfortunate people.
So if you see a very, very well executed painting of a despicable person, is that a work of art?
Well, I don't know, the painting, I would need to see the painting, right?
Yeah, I actually wanted to find one for this. So I'll do that for you.
Is it, or Jersey, are you saying that art is actually the artist's response to an upgrade that the artist is seeking?
No, I'm saying that the art is about unfortunate people and the goodness, integrity, and gracefulness in these conditions, in adversity, how people find themselves and how people become sane in a horrible situation and keep their integrity intact. Art is showing that and approaching that. And it is not about people who are successful. I know art doesn't create anything about people that are successful because they are successful, right? It's not really, no meaning in it at all. But also the art is not about people who take advantage of others, right? Because that's not really, there is no meaning in it either, right? It's not really something that I would even consider myself to approach somebody that take advantage of another human being. And well, of course, that one is sick, right? The whole family, became sick. But that is really something that, the family loses basic cleanness and basic, goodness, basic. That it doesn't have to lose it.
Well, these are moral judgments, and it feels like moral judgments are really intertwined in your definition of art.
Well, it's always they are, right? When you look into artists and how they live life and how they care for another human being and how they stay with the integrity of who we are, it's always there. It's always there. Otherwise, we would be lost. You see, the whole collapse of the art in Eastern Europe, in Europe after the war, was that the question was why if Germans who created this, incredible music and arts, and mostly music, were able to create Holocaust, then the saying was that artists stopped believing that they really can save us. So in a word, there's no point of art. And it was really hard to find art, after the war, after the Holocaust. So I remember this poem. The poem Różewicz was this Polish poet, and it was the return to the goodness, to the integrity of the human being existing in the world, and returning to himself as a valuable human being, and the return was facing with the very simple things in life. And it was, the poem goes, this is the knife, I take a knife, this is the bread, I cut the bread. And it goes this restoring basic values of humanity. very basic. And if we lose those basic values, and then, you know, we are really lost.
So Jersey, can I ask you, so the situation becomes less relevant, right? So you don't have to have a dire situation to offer restorative value, which is what I think is missing in most leadership, right? We trainings, right? We take somebody who's really poor and they become rich. But what about the people who weren't poor and also become rich, you know, or also are successful in applying their talents? We don't have enough discussion of that. And I think that's discrimination against people who aren't in a dire situation, who can reach for better. It's about reaching for better.
Well, here we have a situation with the virtues and what we do in life, right? So if we don't have virtues, we can have a person that goes through life and doesn't really know what is right, what is good, and takes, you know, does everything to advance in life, right? Like, you know, the family really in the parasite, right? Anything is okay. If that everything is okay, the danger happens, right? So we can be in the situations where the companies, let's say, can create wealth doing something wrong, right? Because there is no virtue. So if we add the virtue to people, that we can definitely create a better world, because these people will not do certain things that would cause danger, or that would cause, you know, the taking advantage of another human being. And that's why virtues are important, and that's why, you know, arts are important in schools and everywhere else, right? So we have some kind of a feeling what is right and what is not. It, in spite of whether this will make us rich or not, the rich or not shouldn't be really here above the virtue. Never, right? The virtue, should control a human being. And if that human being loses the virtue, we know where that human being is going, right? We have a rapist, and we have bosses that take advantage of the others, forces them to obey. Well, that's the loss of the human, you know, integrity.
So then your comment on the movie is that we see people acting in a non-virtuous way.
Well, there is, we cannot justify in the family wrongdoing. You see, if that family, what they would, if the family was shown with suffering of the poverty and having integrity at the same time, we could develop that way of justifying wrongdoing. But we cannot justify that. So the movie loses the meaning.
I tend to agree with you.
I guess this is Joyce. I guess what I'm wondering about is, would you say the same when there's wrongdoing in the name of religion?
Well, it cannot be really. Wrongdoing is if wrongdoing cannot be justified, then it's wrongdoing. It cannot.
But many people justify wrongdoing in the name of their religion.
Well, that is still not. You cannot justify. You know, because people, in a way, they are not pushed to the extreme to survive, right? So, you know, there's no survival at stake here. So there's something else, like to be wealthy, like the family takes advantage of the rich, or the one that simply is not aware that somebody is cheating. So in the religion happens the same thing. People do it not because they need to survive, but because they have certain beliefs and egos and so on. So it's not really, you cannot justify that. You cannot justify white people with slavery and what they did to blacks, right? And even though they believe was right and whatever they thought was good and whatever they believed, yeah, they believed that it's good to have slaves, and it was very convenient for them.
So Jersey, then why is Gone with the Wind a great film?
I don't remember the movie,
Okay.
so I would need to watch it and see if that movie has any values and where the value is.
I think lightly yesterday at the end of class, somebody mentioned it and you said, yeah, it's a great movie, which might have been a casual throw
It
off.
was a casual or a
Yeah.
movie, romantic movie, whatever. I don't even know that movie. I don't remember that movie. Where's the meaning of that movie? Why the movie is there? So I will watch it, and then yeah.
That's a good idea, because I think you will have some problems with it.
Oh, really? I will see. Gone with the Wind, you mean?
It's an incredibly popular film and known as one of our greatest, and yet I hate that film.
Ah, okay. Well, it'll be interesting to know why.
You'll see.
All right, I will see. All right. Wow, it was a great session today. I will go and bring my some tea and let you talk. Of course, to wrap it up is we'll talk more and more about that, and we'll get to the bottom of this things. And it's really not easy to anybody to look into being virtuous person. I started long time ago, and I was telling you over and over that to be a person of virtue is an extremely hard choice. It's not easy to be, because you simply cannot get away with anything doing wrong. You just cannot get away with it. And that I see more, when I see really extreme poverty like my family was, right? You can justify, father stealing because his child is dying of freezing. That's the only you can justify the father.
Let's have the die again. Well, just as well. It's time to get your bedtime stuff. Wait, do you want to grab the pink one?
Ellen, you need to mute.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So in the poem, justifying the father, it's possible to justify the father. But if the father, was stealing coal and was storing this and selling, well, then poem would not be written. Nobody would write that poem. All right, time for tea.
Wow, Amy, you go, girl.
I'm getting a headache.
Dick, I listened to class yesterday, and I loved what you brought up. It was just really important.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was for me, definitely.
Yeah. I didn't understand the answer, but that when I don't understand something, I'll just let it sit.
Yeah.
I think I've missed quite a bit. I had to step away. What happened? Were you talking about Parasite?
Yesterday
Oh
or
no,
today?
Amy was just commenting on yesterday and the discussion we got into.
Dick,
What was the answer?
Yeah, what was the answer?
Remind me, what was the answer?
Dick, do you know what the answer was to your query about the book reviews?
Well,
Not
I mean
really.
the answer.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Dick, you were
Sorry.
and not being congruent.
Okay.
With,
Okay, we probably need to back up. So what was the question first?
Did you
And then
watch
what
the
was the
tape?
answer? Yeah, no, I just don't remember because it was such a long conversation. There's so many bits, so many parts to it.
Yeah, it was kind of rambly. It got into something like we were in today with Amy's comment as well. That you know, it was. Oh, I don't know how to describe it.
You asked him about the reviews. You
Yeah, I
said
know. Yeah.
that was
but
the
Dick, didn't you say that his way of responding to those bad reviews was not congruent with his main message, and you were calling out on that?
Yeah. But
I mean, that was said, right?
At the risk of like I'd like to think that we're developing a lot of trust here, and I wrote him a note this morning about that, and I think that that's what we're trying to do as a whole group, including Jersey, and so we should be able to discuss these things, and if we have a question about, well, what I brought up yesterday or what Amy brought up today, it just points out that there's more than one interpretation, and Jersey's certainly entitled to have his, and we're entitled to have ours. But I think the point is that we are strong. He wants us to be strong in our beliefs in order to carry the word out about the happy body and how valuable it can be for people. I've really come to believe in the whole program, and as I've said a few times, you know, it's a life-changing experience, and that's the kind of, I think he just wants us to be strong with our beliefs and what we take forward with that. So.
Do you know the definition of a good class I was taught is the extent to which the professor learns? And I also think there's a Shakespearean, I guess, quote that says, words lead behavior.
Yeah.
So what you ended up saying, I think you were pointing out that in this particular instance, you noticed how the behavior hasn't yet caught up with the words.
Right, yeah.
But I think his words are very good.
Yeah.
But I think it's very difficult to teach what he's teaching and 100% of the time be congruent.
Right.
Because similar thing. And I think that my whole focus is on trying to make my behaviors congruent with my work. And I'm not perfect, but I'm trying to, minimize that gap.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you might also be troubled by the response to your response, which I also agree with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
right.
that's a little bit bigger of a gap, but also a necessary one, right?
Right.
And a forgivable one. I think he was saying too about something has to be at stake. I would have rather that he said, our integrity is always at stake, man.
Right. Yeah, right. That's true.
Operate as though your integrity is at stake. Don't trouble yourself with understanding if you're poor, if you're black, or if you're whatever.
Yeah.
Realize you have a choice to make, and your integrity is at stake, man. So make the right choice. And if you don't, it will affect you adversely, and you might also be blind to that. So wake up to that too. So anyway, thank you for the summary.
The other aspect of in my educational career, my main job, I always felt my philosophical approach and my main job was to make myself redundant, whether I was teaching students or whether I was, in administration with a staff. And with the adults, I told them that. And so I remember one instance where I'd said this, and one of the teachers said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, what if I was in my office and I died? Would you still be able to go on after? How long would it take until you realized? And one of my favorite teachers, she was an older person, and she said, oh, probably about 3 days, and then the smell would catch up with us. But so I think that's Jersey's point as well. I think that he's trying to make himself redundant in a lot of ways, so that we're standing on our own. But anyway, I digress. I'm going to mute for a minute, sort my head out.
Well, if it's all about virtue, and human growth can only occur with virtue, then it's taking films and poetry and stories to teach us that we have to grow, we have to be virtuous. I just think it can be accomplished in a lot of different ways.
It does. It does. And yeah, it's really hard. It would be really hard to find another movie like Parasite at all.
What do you mean?
Without it at all, right? And justifying the, I have compassion to the family, of course, because they are just lost people in the world, and there is nothing goodness in that family. So it's just, I have compassion to them, but I still would send them to jail.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so, okay. Then the situation at the end of the movie, kind of a message that you kind of can get away with it. That is a really a message that doesn't happen in, unless the message is that people without virtues control us, and it's a really dark world, and they will keep doing that. They will keep raping us, and that's where we live in. Well, do we live in this world? We don't. We really
Well,
live.
those are two ends of the spectrum, but there's a couple other little.
Yeah, well, they're always
tie those together.
Look at the Me Too movement, right?
Yes, let's.
Yeah, Me Too movement is really that movement that our virtues are sending us to be courageous enough to say no to that behavior. And if we didn't have something inside of us to stand up and to be good, that it would never happen.
Well, yeah, women have been very courageous in that regard, which is why I had a problem with the movie Click with Adam Sandler, because it was done at a time pre-Me Too, and every single female in that movie except for Rachel Dratch was tits and ass, and the wife was dressed in tits and ass, and she was given the worst dialogue. Every female representation in the film was horrible.
You're
and
right.
So it was so distracting to me that it was very difficult to like set half the movie aside so I could focus on the virtuous aspect of the film.
Yeah, you're right about that. In dogs, doing the stuff, and the whole point only about that movie is that if you push forward,
yes,
you can lose the messages that can be useful here, right? But a lot of things are in the movie, like dogs. With
sure.
Watching this movie is just like this movie for kids, and it's just what's going on, right? We don't need to have it. It's
but
just
there's a lot of that in Parasite that there's still a message in there, and if you throw away the whole film because it is lacking something that is very antithetical to the growth of humankind that you're witnessing right there in the film, then you won't get the message.
Well, the whole thing is that, you get the message, you can get away with something. So that is really not a good message. That's the socialistic message that, you are kind of lost and poor and we'll save you, kind of, and justify, wrongdoing. So
I didn't get that. That wasn't the message I got.
Not.
Why is that so socialistic? I don't understand.
Well, the movie ends up, with the justifying wrongdoing. So it's justifying wrongdoing and taking care of the people. It's a kind of like, I don't know, gives me weird feelings about justifying wrongdoing. And taking care maybe of these people and babying it.
Yeah, they felt entitled.
Something is off at the end, especially at the end of the movie, that the movie doesn't end with the punishment, doesn't end with the doing the right thing. So it doesn't close with, it closes with criminals getting away with it. So it's really, I don't know when actually that could happen in any movie. Maybe you can bring me one that was started with the a character that was really dark and criminal, and that got away at the end. And so probably you will not be able to come out with that, because this is really wrong. Looking into our world, how we live life, we cannot justify this things like that.
They were not formally punished, is what you're saying, but they lost their sister, they lost the daughter, they went through loss through this whole situation. It's not like they weren't,
father murders the person and gets away with it, hiding, and the son doesn't do anything about that. The son is going to save him, and that is the message here. So somehow they justify the wrongdoing at the end.
I hate to disagree, but I think it's a tragic ending. Nobody wins. It's an explosive, the parasite is hanging on and sucking you dry, and then it all explodes into this bloody mess at the end. Nobody wins. The guy's locked in a basement. He's got nothing.
Because, you go somewhere else with it. Right.
And the rest of them, one has brain damage, it's like.
I feel the same thing, but you cannot pass one thing, that responsibility for causing something is responsibility.
I see the family as victims.
That is missed.
I see the poor family as the victims.
No, they are not poor. They are not poor.
Why are they living in a flooded basement with a urinal?
They are they are poor with bad behaviors, some kind of like, okay, well, I don't know if they're really, really poor.
They're really, really poor.
Yes. I would not live in that flooded basement with food.
Poor or not, we compare the very poor, extremely poor families that they don't lose themselves. And if they do, we send them to jail always.
I think the society has lost them.
Well, that's a socialistic approach to that.
The two classes.
Exactly, socialistic approach to the problem. Yeah, society lost them. Yeah, society, is guilty here. Society lost. No. It's a family out there living their life and is responsible for their basic virtues and basic, integrity.
Well, you know what's great about this work of art called Parasite is that they didn't tie it up neatly in a bow and punish them at the end, because that would have been too simple.
That would too easy a punishment.
Well, it's better just to let them go, right?
I think it's better to come away from that movie as an audience member and just shaking your head and saying, well, God, what's going on here? And if I have any integrity, what am I going to do about it?
Maybe it's better to be outraged at the movie, so that you then are disgusted by it and you think that is horrendous, and you learn from that.
I just thought it was tragic.
There are many works of art historically that were totally unacceptable. I'm thinking some of Picasso's works were not accepted originally, and now we value them.
During the Rite of Spring concert, people went into delusions, and there was a brawl in the audience the first time the Rite of Spring was ever played. People went out of their minds. They had never heard anything like that. It was so disturbing to them.
I remember it was this German articles written about Hamburg and when people were burned in churches, and And the article was aiming that we suffer too. And I talk about this to my Jewish client in LA, and he said, you know, it feels for me like a tiger lost its paw and then cry about losing its paw.
Josie, I got lost with that. Where did that come in, or what were you talking about there? I'm sorry, maybe it's me. Can you repeat that, rephrase it, something? Forgive me.
German people who created the Holocaust, right? They started writing articles that because of bombing Hamburg and other cities, they suffered casualties, right? And they suffered also during the war. Not only that Poland suffered and Russians and others, right? They suffered too. So they tried to write articles about that. So I talked to my Jewish friend, and he said, well, it feels to me like a lost his paw and he's crying about that.
After he slaughtered the village.
Right. Yes, and lost his paw, right? Okay.
Well, clearly we all lost. I mean, in varying degrees and different things, but we all lost in World War II. There were no winners.
Well, it's a different point of view, right? And about different things, really. We're talking about really situations when you are creating damages, and then you're also saying that you are suffering. You're beginning, horrifying things in life, and then you say that you are suffering too. So it's like this family could say, we suffered too, right? In Parasite, they could say, we suffered too.
Of course they feel that way. Of course they feel that way.
But then, do we care about that?
I did.
Well, that's
an individual choice, Jersey.
That you can see the loss, you can see the messed up the family completely, and then the family also has to pay for it, because humanity cannot let them go, and that's why it's the wrong message in the movie. It's a socialistic kind of message. There's no responsibility. Kind of society embraces them. Oh, you poor me. You did something wrong.
That was the message you got. I did not get poor them at all.
Well, there is no responsibility at the end. Sorry.
You're talking about individual responsibility versus societal.
Yes, yeah. I'm talking about letting them go. Right, so if you let them go, and these are the people that created chaos. These are the people that they are criminals, right? And these are the people, and then these are the people that create really problems, and then you let them go, and that is wrong in any society.
So your idealism is beautiful, it's admirable, it's refreshing, but life is not fair.
Well, life is not really fair, no, but the consequences of what we're doing has to happen, right? Consequences of
what makes you think in Parasite that they were let go? I mean, I think the film doesn't go there.
Well,
they don't resolve the issue, and that's what makes it art to a certain extent.
Oh, let's not talk about the art. Fathers is hiding, and the son is going to save him. So it means that they will go into the light, not to the prison, but into the light.
I don't remember if he actually saves him or if he says he's going to save him.
That's the message, right? It's
Yes.
the
That
message.
is the message you got. That is not necessarily the message everyone else got from the film.
Movie ends that way.
I
That-
think
Fantasy ending. It's a complete fantasy ending. There's
Right.
It is
way
a
to live in that basement like that for years, and there's no way that kid with the brain damage is going to become the big shot and buy the house.
well, we don't know, right?
No, we don't, but I think we have.
The son is really motivated to save the father.
He loves the father.
Yeah.
It's about love.
You know, he loves the father who murdered somebody.
And these people all came together. They're not even related, right? They're thrown together somehow. They're not genetically related, right? They're not really father and son. He's just helped the kid
Yes,
up.
they are.
no,
thought-
they're a family. They're a real family.
Family. They're family.
Off the street.
No,
Brought him in off the street. No,
No, I
they're-
don't know.
they're
I don't
family.
know. I mean,
They're just
I'm
pretending to be a
but I
different
thought they
family.
were all related.
okay. I must be thinking of Spotlight or Shoplifter or something.
Can you imagine discussions on Stoa and, you know, Stoics discussing life? And it was like 2,500 years ago, and that it was Caesars, and they were doing this butchery and things, and you know, how they could find themselves within, and how they could be, you know, be sane in this world, that the world was trying to sometimes kill them without any reason, and how they could be human to the end, and how they could not to fear or show that they do not fear losing life or losing anything, and they couldn't be hurt in that way at all, right? So you know, finding this humanity sometimes is very hard, and it is always something graceful in our life that people are able to find it, and this is the meaning of our life, to find in the adversity, to find in the vices that, you know, our humanity. To find,
Yes, but it isn't the meaning of every work of art.
I'm not talking about the art, I'm talking about the humanity. I mean, to be human. It's bigger than art.
Yeah.
Or to be human, you know, what it means. And if we, you know, if we lose it, then what we become? And is it the virtue in it? Is it something that is meaning in it? What would Viktor Frankl say about such a thing, right? So, you know, what people would say that, you know, survived Holocaust, and, you know, horrifying thing, Black people that survived, you know, in extreme poverty and murder and rape and everything else. And they still were able to keep the integrity of a human being.
So maybe the virtue of this film, Parasite, is that there is no virtue, and it sparks incredible thought and discussion and a reference for our modern culture, you know, that we are at times without virtue. Maybe it's got a point.
Of course, yeah. Well, you know. Okay.
And is that our failure?
Well, there's no other failure, because there are families like this, and not many there. You know, most our families in life have this integrity, and they are not losing like that. So there's no reason to, you know, to show this, and there's no reason to even work with it and letting be that way, because, you know, simply there are no people like that. No families like that.
But it's creating a paradox.
Josie, I've worked in the social welfare system, and there are people like that.
True, they are, but, you know, it's like you said that there's a 1% of people really in life that has maybe problems. That most people are good people. Most people are really good in poverty and behave this way. You know, I lived in Van Nuys, and I was going to this park, and when I was in the park, there were Mexican families and extremely poor. And I saw the families, you know, very poor with children, and, you know, on these trucks coming to the grass and set the camping there. And, you know, the trucks they work with, you could see, and this love of children, this love of integrity, this beautiful thing in the family, extremely poor families, right? That is something what the art is looking for. And that's what we are looking for. And we can simply easily be lost on discussions of, you know, of meaningless people, and missing really that the work is in actually in looking at people that really create our life better, like and there are not many of them, those who really create, like Stand and Deliver, right? Or the great debaters. And there are people that overcome extreme adversity in life.
But wouldn't it be boring if everybody was the same way?
It's not the same way. It's not boring. You have movie Equalizer, for example. You know, Denzel Washington is really a human being that is killing and you know, doing kind of a, you know, justice. What about the Iron Man? You know, there is a good message too inside. You know, all the movies have really a certain, you know, humanity in it. You take the humanity out of it, and what do you have? You have Parasite, right?
But if you take Jerzy, if you take the humanity out of it, and then you provoke a strong reaction, as discussed or whatever, then can that not bring forward the virtue in the people watching?
It cannot.
Why not?
Why not?
Doesn't produce the it doesn't produce the virtue.
Look, a good movie about good people doesn't produce a virtue either. It doesn't do a damn thing except make people feel really good that they saw something good. It doesn't necessarily change their behavior any more than seeing a film about despicable people.
It's not about despicable people. It is about how despicable people go through the story. And
What is it about changing behavior?
A virtuous film about virtuous people doesn't necessarily change anyone's behavior.
Well, I'd like to hear Jerzy's opinion on changing behavior in a societal framework.
Everything what, you know, shows really that something changes for better helps humanity move ahead at any situation. It doesn't matter whether it's a movie or it's a poem or it's a, you know, my, let's say, getting better in life, everything. It is not that you cannot control, you know, that, because you cannot know what the changing behavior and showing that changing behavior for better, how we feel. But even though we feel something that is right, is very important, because we watch the movie and we go to the movie and then we watch somebody doing the right thing. We feel the right thing. We feel it. Doesn't mean that we will go into the world and we'll behave right away, that we will be, you know, like Stand and Deliver human being. But we identify with that and we feel good about that. And that's why we go to movies. That's why we go to music. That's why we go to arts, to feel that thing inside of us, what is human, what is good. That's why. And it doesn't mean that we become that.
I think it's important to create a societal structure where those, I'm tempted to say virtues, I don't know if I should, values or, those more humane behaviors are encouraged and rewarded.
Well, that's a solution. Your solution. You are thinking solution. I don't think solutions. I just think that when the goodness happens, it's a good thing. That it spreads, and whenever it happens, it has the impact on people, and it's something that we cannot measure it, but to feel that somebody did something right is very important for us. And to feel that somebody did something wrong, we don't feel good about that, right? Very, very simple.
Well, now I understand your whole point, which has nothing to do with whether something is a work of art or not.
Yeah.
It has to do with propagating good feelings, which lead to eventually good behavior and a happy body.
Yep. Wouldn't you liken this movie to good food and bad food?
Yeah,
so
but you cannot justify wrongdoing in anywhere in life. You cannot justify wrongdoing.
That is not to be disagreed with. I'm just saying your whole point is that you feel what we ingest through the media, through films and music, should make us feel good because we will carry that goodness forward. That I get.
Well, and when you look at movies, and stories and novels, and the way we tell stories, we do not tell stories that we can justify wrongdoing unless it is character. There is, sympathetic character, like in the great debaters. The boy delivers the message when that breaking the law has sense, when it can be justified. And the whole Harvard at that time, discusses the way that you can never break the law, right? But the deliverance of that boy, the speech about the lynching people and actually justifying the law in Texas, it brings us to and it was Lynch, was the last name Lynch, right? He's talking about the one who was famous for lynching, black people, burning them, and law was protecting these people. So here we have the situation that we can justify breaking that law, and that's what he delivered. And it's really hard in our life to imagine another situation that you could justify in breaking law. And that family is breaking the law, and we cannot justify breaking that law in Parasite.
Do you think that family?
The end of your question got cut off, Elaine.
Yeah, we missed it, Ilion.
Try again.
Eliane, you're on mute.
Oh, do you think that family knew any better?
No, we didn't know better.
Okay, so then what?
Well,
so
did soldiers knew better in Poland raping women? They didn't know better. Should we really do something about that?
I would think that they would know better, but I don't know. I'm talking about.
They didn't know better. So are they responsible still or not?
They knew better. Come on.
No. They didn't know better. They were raping every woman, every child in Poland and in Germany probably and everywhere else. Did they know better? No.
Of course they did. They would have known that it was illegal in Russia as just as much as anywhere else.
No, they didn't know better. They were just savages behaving that way.
So who's the intervener then? Who's the person who intervenes? The person who knows better, what do they do?
If you can do, you do something. If you cannot do it, you don't. Right? So, Polish people couldn't do anything about it. Right? They could suffer only, and they couldn't really fight the overwhelming force. They suffered. They received the pain, but they couldn't fight it. So you had to wait 50 years to overcome that.
Jerzy, do you mind me asking, what was your experience with the war? Where were you, and what was your family?
I was born after the war. I was born in 1954, so I was born after the war. But, my father was in the war, and, and my grandfather was in the first war, was captured by Russians, and there was 1918 when the Polish army was formed and independence was, declared. And my grandfather was caught and was sent to Siberia for 4 years, and ran away from Siberia, so escaped from there, and walked to Poland, and walked only during the night. Didn't take any trains and things and so on. So it took him 2 years. If he was captured, I wouldn't be here, right? But it's I think that discussion is good to see, right? And to see that what we are and what our values are and how we operate as human beings. It's when something like this, soldiers, Russian soldiers, what they did in Poland, and get away with it. That is something what Parasite showed. You can get away with it. You rape and you get away with it. And then what do we have? We have communism, right? Or tyranny, whatever it is, right? You let it happen to the end. Gone with the Wind, Emmy. I'm going to watch it.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Margaret.
I'm a Southern girl.
I need to watch all these films again now.
Scarlett is this incredibly strong,
vain,
crazy woman.
It just goes to show that a great film is worth seeing again.
See you in a week.
We got a really strong message about slavery, that's for sure.
Gone with the Wind. I'm going to watch it. It was very interesting that you said something about that. It's like now I'm curious about watching that movie. I don't remember the movie at all, so I don't have any.
Isn't it 3 hours long or something?
Yeah.
Be ready. Get a nice big bowl of potatoes.
But for some reason, you have this a strange uptake on it. So I'm interested, to watch that movie.
Oh, I'm not going to watch it again.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm not a great student. I'm a C student. That's it. That's all I get. I love you, Jersey. I love fighting with you. I love working with you.
All right. Debating is always good.
Yeah.
When the master, you know, outwits.
All right, y'all. We'll see you tomorrow.
Great session. Thank you, Josie.
Awesome.
Bye, everybody.
Awesome
See you
day.
tomorrow. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.